Welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. Now, multiple Russian drones violated Polish airspace during a coordinated overnight assault on Ukraine. NATO aircraft assisted in intercepting the threat, prompting Poland to invoke Article 4 and call for urgent consultations with allies. With debris scattered across multiple provinces and air defense capabilities under scrutiny, the incident has raised grave questions about national readiness. Joining us today on TVP World is Aleksandra Uznańska-Wiśniewska, Polish MP and Civic Platform and member of the Committee on National Defense. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you very much for having me.
So how would you interpret the scale and intent of this incursion? Do you think, with all the number of these drones coming in, would you categorize that as just an accident, or is this clearly intentional?
Not at all, in terms of it being an accident. I think it was clearly intentional. It was unprecedented, both in terms of scale. It was a huge number of drones, 19 so far of violations of our Polish airspace that we know of. However, this might not be the final data, 4 of which have been shot down using both Polish Operational Command and NATO forces. However, this is fully unprecedented, not only because of the scale of the attack, but also of the fact that not only were the drones coming from the territory of Ukraine, from which some might say that this might have been an unprovoked Russian aggression, but in fact they flew directly from the territory of Belarus, obviously Lukashenko being a key Putin's ally, which basically shows that this was a fully intentional attack from Kremlin and from Russia. This also occurring ahead of the planned military exercises, joint military exercises between Russia and Belarus, planned between 12th to 16th of September. And this really, I would interpret as Russia testing and probing not only Poland, but NATO, really, in terms of how are we going to react, how fast are we going to react, are we going to shut down the drones, and to what extent are we going to actually be able to counter such attack. And this is an aggression, an act of aggression. And I truly believe, that only through an extremely firm deterrence, not only on behalf of Poland and in NATO, are we going to be able to deter any further escalation from the Russian side.
All right, so what do you think is a result from this probing exercise? Do you think that NATO have sufficiently demonstrated its capabilities to coordinate, or do you still see gaps in the air defense system?
Yeah, so from one hand, I must say that, Poland and the Allied forces, indeed, we've managed to successfully carry out this operation. So that has really worked quite seamlessly overnight, and the attack started at 11:30 p.m. last night. The last drone has been shot down around 6:30 in the morning, So essentially all night of an attack. So the coordination operation between us, the allies, the military forces, the state apparatus has been quite impressive. However, I must say that what remains is the fact that the fact alone that Russia allowed itself to escalate to this extent, I believe proves that NATO's deterrence must be stronger. That to insufficient extent we have deterred them so far, and they attack because they can. So we have to dramatically ramp up our not only military capabilities, European military capabilities, coordination of our allies. We've been really grateful, to have, for instance, Dutch F-35s that helped us in this attack. So we had F-35s from the Netherlands, then we had F-16s, obviously American purchase, they have Mi-24s, Mi-17s, Black Hawks, coordinated and participating in this operation. But this I believe shows really that our defense has to be significantly has to take the situation extremely seriously. Yeah.
Right, definitely. How would you characterize the coordination overnight with all these kind of NATO allies scrambling to intercept this missile? A lot of people have been talking about, well, what about the most important or most powerful ally, the United States, with Trump kind of leaving a relatively cryptic message on social media? How do you think Washington might react?
So I believe that, as well as not only the results of today's attacks and the very recent message on social media from Donald Trump, seemingly criticizing the attack from Russia on the NATO's eastern flank, and the fact, that sort of over the last weeks after not particularly effective Alaska summit. We had seen actually the Trump administration, I think, becoming more hawkish towards Russia, and this is something that we really welcome. This is something, you know, that we've been communicating, and that we as a responsible ally must be speaking truth to power.
Right.
Last night I've been speaking with Stephanie Holmes, you know, a new charge d'affaires who just arrived to Warsaw, United States Embassy, you know, on the fact that that it's extremely important to ensure, you know, that the American presence, including the troops on the ground, you know, but also support in terms of solidarity to NATO, because NATO is not an alliance that can be purely transactional. It must rest, the strength of the alliance must rest on solidarity, on freedom, on defense of the liberal democracies. That this is something that, that I believe is a priority and continues to be a priority as well for President Trump. And we as Poland, you know, not only have we demonstrated overnight that we're capable of deterring such attack, but also that the Russian threat is not to be underestimated. And that Putin is not to be trusted. Poland, like very few other nations, understand the threat of Russian imperialism. Russian imperialism, which really goes far beyond Donetsk, Crimea, or Lugansk, you know. Vladimir Putin has really not multiple times mentioned that, well, the fall of USSR was one of the greatest tragedies, you know, that Russia or the USSR could have experienced. And we truly believe, you know, that Putin is not to be trusted. If he wanted to end this war, he could have by withdrawing the troops from Ukraine, you know, overnight. But he's still not doing that, obviously.
Right. Another interesting thing I'm observing as well is that this incursion is perhaps one of the biggest hurdle or biggest challenge Poland have faced since presidential election. Now, under the cohabitation government, how would you rate the coordination between the president and the prime minister?
So I have to say that I was pleased to see that the coordination was really well done, and that this time the presidential office, you know, has actually seemed to be open to cooperation and seemed to understand the gravitas of the situation. Our Prime Minister Donald Tusk have managed to meet with the president 2 times overnight, and then this morning also presented a statement in front of the entire parliament on the security developments of the situation. Following the consultations between the president and the prime minister, Poland has sent a formal request to NATO to trigger Article 4 and ask for an urgent consultation between the allies. And I believe that the priority on such consultation should be to ramp up especially the anti-drone air defense system over NATO's eastern flank.
Right, so if Russia's incursion into Polish airspace is indeed an attempt at testing the resolve of the NATO allies, do you think that this is a good demonstration that we are perhaps a lot more united than the Russians would suppose? Well,
I think it did demonstrate unity. However, you know, it's been a couple of hours only, really, since the attack. And we must remember that, you know, today in Ukraine, today Ukraine is fighting 1,249 or 6 days, I believe, since the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion. While, you know, this huge amount of drones indeed entered and violated Polish airspace territory, Ukraine had to fight 415 drones, including over 40 missiles. I believe 386 of them have been shot down, the drones, you know, which means that essentially Ukraine is fighting day in and day out, you know, for the very ideals of daring to associate themselves with the ideals of NATO and the EU. And this is something that European Union and NATO have to take extremely seriously. We have to continue our support to Ukraine, which is fighting a brave David versus Goliath fight currently with Russia. We must put more severe sanctions on Russia, and Poland will push and pressure, you know, for more severe pressure on Vladimir Putin, including using the immobilized assets and Russian windfall revenues to aid Ukraine. And to speak also truth to power to our allies, the fact that, you know, the situation is extremely serious, and Poland will not tolerate, you know, anymore us being wishy-washy or lukewarm over, you know, ramping up our defense spending.
All right, this really put things into perspective when comparing to the situation in Ukraine and what we are facing right now. Thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on TVP World. Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. For more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.